Hello and welcome to Construction One-on-One with Ravi Bhatia. My guest today is John Eschemuller. John, welcome.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It really is an honor to have you. John and I have known each other for about 35 years, and he has been a great mentor to me. And I don't think I'd be sitting anywhere in any position without John's guidance, especially early in my career. And because of John, I got opportunities that I would have never dreamed of. And it's all because of John and his willingness to share and shape the future of the industry, and that's why I think he's so special. As our podcast here continues to focus on leadership and innovation, I can't think of somebody better to talk to us about these things than Mr. Eschemuller. So, John, you've
Thank
had.
you for your
Oh,
kind words,
you're
Ravi.
most welcome, John. You're most welcome.
It was my pleasure to do that for you and many others in the industry.
You certainly have, and none of us can ever repay you, really, and you'll always pay it forward. So, in the spirit of paying it forward, we want to continue to learn from you. Tell us about, your career and what sparked you to get into engineering and construction.
Okay. Well, in my early childhood, I came from somewhat humble beginnings. Both my parents were ill, and I lived in a city housing project in Brooklyn overlooking the Navy Yard and the East River. So when I looked out my window, I watched various naval ships being built, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and could look on the skyline across Manhattan and watch buildings being built. So I always felt like I wanted to get involved with building things. So that was kind of like my dream, if you will, in terms of what I like to do with my career. I was fortunate enough to be accepted into Brooklyn Tech, which required an entrance exam, very competitive. Got a wonderful education at Brooklyn Tech, which I'm really grateful for. Prepared me very well to go into college and start the engineering curriculum, and found that I was at least a good year ahead of everybody else that hadn't gone to a specialized technical high school. And City College was also free at the time, so I got a second free education, a wonderful engineering school that was one of the top 10 engineering schools in the nation at the time. And that education allowed me to fulfill my dreams and career and fulfill my American dream. Along with my grandparents who made great sacrifices coming to this country in the early 1900s, with not being able to speak English and having little money in their pockets and working very hard to afford me the opportunity to do what I have done in my career and my life. So I'm thankful for all that. Along those lines, I always feel that it's always good to give something back, especially in appreciation for all the people that have helped me along in my studies and my career and mentored me and provided me, support and mentoring, and also financial assistance, where I won several scholarships from different organizations. So I'm grateful for all that and all the things that it's allowed me to accomplish. When I graduated, I started work for New York Telephone. My job had nothing to do with telephones per se, but it was building buildings for them. So I was involved with building their corporate headquarters, 1095 Avenue of the Americas, which was a combination brand new corporate headquarters for the phone company, moving from the old building they had at 140 West Street, along with a new switching center, which was required in midtown Manhattan because there was just not enough switching capacity and telephone capacity in the midtown area at the time. So so the building was originally being built by Joe Bernstein, who was a developer. So we had discussions with him and convinced him to allow us to lease the building from him and to take over the design and construction process and customize the building for our needs. So the lower 20 floors of the building were fitted out for telephone switching equipment with large electrical demands and very high heat loads, etc., high ceiling heights for the equipment, IV floor loading. And the top portion of the building was the headquarters from the 23rd floor to the 41st floor. And we created a sky lobby, which was a little innovative at the time, in order to break the building in half and allow people to bypass the lower half with the switching equipment and get up to the office portion with express elevators. So that project was challenging. Dealing with, the executives in the company, dealing with the various departments and the headquarters operations and their special needs, building out various types of spaces, whether it's the office spaces, the cafeterias, the conference centers, the switching centers, etc. So every one of them has a bit of a unique requirement, and there's no cookie cutter solution, if you will, to how you approach each one of those areas.
At a relatively young age, you were thrust into this position where you had a lot of people you were answering to under a high pressure and situation, right? I mean, you had some bosses that had deadlines.
Oh yeah, the chairman wanted to move in and have his Christmas party and make sure I can have my board meeting there and make sure everything works. So I remember that well. But the phone company was, very good to me. I moved up through the ranks and got rewarded for all my hard work and try to respond to the challenge. For a while, they put me in charge of an administrative position called personnel and budgets. And so I was involved with putting together all the budgeting for the various projects the phone company needed to build out, which were conference centers and other administrative offices, switching centers, operator centers, etc., and built several projects for them over that time. And they were kind enough to send me back to school for my master's degree in business, my MBA. So I went through what was called the executive MBA program, which again, a free education. So that was a wonderful experience. We had people from various companies attending, Con Edison, IBM, Johnson & Johnson. So it wasn't just, the phone company or whatever. But as a group, we went through that program for 2 years together, and I learned just as much from the professors as I did from my fellow students, because we had a lot of projects we worked on as groups.
That was an interesting program, right? That was at Pace, right?
That was at Pace University, that's correct. And so when I graduated, I now had my engineering degree, I had my professional engineering license, I had 8 years of construction experience with the phone company, and now I have my business degree. So I was able to combine, my business skills and engineering skills and apply them to the work and the assignments that I had at the time. And at that time, divestiture was happening in the Bell system, where this Bell system was broken apart, AT&T, Mother Bell, and New York Telephone and New England Telephone was spun off as what was called NYNEX at the time. Mm-hmm. For a while, people thought that was a sleeping pill because the X was Somax and whatever. But given my business degree, they challenged me to now focus my attention and skills to become the assistant treasurer and the assistant secretary of NYNEX and the non-regulated holding companies that were formed as a result of divestiture. So for several years, I was involved with dealing with over 3 million shareholders that we inherited from AT&T, setting up the master trust for our pension plans and savings plans that was worth over $13 billion, having NYNEX's stock be traded on the stock exchange, dealing with the Federal Communications Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission to register our securities. And it was an incredible challenge. I mean,
that is remarkable. And that's something I never knew about you. Like, how am I learning this now?
Yeah. Well, it was a very challenging time and probably a once in a lifetime experience. Okay. Divestiture doesn't come along every day, and certainly that kind of challenge. And we'd wake up every day and say, okay, what do we need to accomplish today? And I was traveling around quite a bit. And it was like, where am I? Okay, who am I meeting with? What do I need to do? And, then move on to the next challenge. So anyway, divestiture was pulled off in less than a year, which was a small miracle in terms of what it accomplished, or had to be accomplished.
That was a big deal, right, at the time?
Oh, yeah. In fact, a lot of people said it couldn't be done, couldn't be done, but it got done. They all get done, Robbie.
Yeah.
All you got to do is put your mind on your shoulder and get the right resources and build the right team to accomplish the task at hand.
Wow. So you got leadership experience early in your career. You also made an effort to make sure that you got the skills, the education, and the qualifications necessary to get to that next step. And I think that's where you served as a great role model, because for the younger people who were working under you after you left the phone company, I think we saw you as, hey, here's somebody. At least I saw you that way. Somebody I can pattern myself. This is a roadmap.
Right.
We don't have to invent it. We can follow John.
Well, thank you for that compliment. I found that having my engineering degree, which teaches you how to think and solve problems and identify resources, and then having my MBA, which complements the business skills that are required, along with leadership and team building and innovation and managing change and all those good things. The combination of those two degrees gave me the skills to approach any project or challenge and be able to organize it, plan it, execute it, have a project that was successful, a happy client, on time, on budget, good quality, and a good reference for the next project.
Oh, so you went. So after you left the phone company, that's when we met, and then you worked on some great projects after that.
Yes, I left the phone company halfway through my career. It has changed quite a bit in terms of its corporate culture and whatnot. But I felt I wanted to go back to the world of construction and leave the world of finance and banking and secretarial administration with the shareholders, et cetera. So I went to work for Structure Tone. Interestingly, they knocked on my door at the time, and they had just gotten the Morgan Bank 60 Wall Street corporate headquarters project, which was a 1.2 million square foot build out down in the Wall Street area. And they had been located in several buildings in the area, but nowhere was one building housing all Morgan Bank. So this was going to consolidate everybody into one headquarters, along with all their data centers and cabling and telecommunications and technology. So I asked Structure Tone, why John? Why are you knocking on my door? So they said, well, you know how to build. This is a fit-up program happening concurrently with a base building build-out by another contractor. You have construction experience, you have managerial experience, you have finance experience, you understand what banks need and how they operate, having had some financial experience, and you also work for the phone company, and this project requires almost $60 million worth of cabling and technology to go into it. So we think you're the perfect fit for what we need to service Morgan Bank on this project and have it be successful. The project at the time, Structure Tone was like a $200 million company at the time. This project was a $200 million addition to that. So it was going to double the size of the company. And quite frankly, it was either going to make them or break them. So it was a challenge.
They bet the company, didn't they? They bet on you, and they bet the company on the project.
Yes. So it's a long bet, on the table, and a lot of risk and a lot of reward. So anyway, the risk paid off, the rewards paid off, and Structure Tone grew and went on to many more challenging projects thereafter, which I'll get into in a minute. But just to finish up Morgan Bank, again, a unique project. Tishman was building the base building. We became the construction manager for the fit-up program. And in terms of maybe an example of innovation, that's when a fit-up program was really starting to take hold, that you didn't have to use necessarily the base building contractor to do all the tenant work, because the fit-up contractors typically would want to finish the entire base building and then go on to the tenant work, where we went in and actually built a good portion of the tenant work concurrently with the base building. Okay, so it kind of overlapped the two programs and moved things along, and we shared the logistics on the project, be it the hoists, the cranes, the loading dock, etc. And So the fit up contractor, in New York City was really born there, I think, or, found its mark.
It was an innovative concept because the concept of construction management at risk was relatively new at the time.
That's correct. That was at risk, yes, probably. So it was not only construction management, fit up, but also at risk.
Yeah, and that's really what you end up specializing in, and then really Structure Tone made its mark there, as being the industry leader in that CMAR delivery.
Right, and we got to put a guaranteed maximum price on the project, and that GMP was put on with basically about 80% of the documents in place, but a very solid understanding of the program of what was required, which we sat down with Morgan Bank and the consultants to ensure that we had a firm understanding of exactly what was needed, when it was needed, how it was needed, et cetera,
Yeah.
and how we were going to deliver it.
You did a GMP at 80% on that project?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so there's some calculated risk there, along with some contingency that you're carrying for certain items.
Right. You have to have a contingency in that kind of situation.
And so just an incredible project, catapulting an entire company, and talk about resources on a project like that and on other subsequent projects. How do you put the right people in the right position? Do you rely on your experience? What kind of challenges do you face doing that?
Well, Structure Tone, had some in-house resources, but a lot of the resources were hired for the particular project with the expertises that were needed, whether it would be the telecom, cabling, and technology. There was an expert hired in that regard. We hired people with strong mechanical and electrical backgrounds to do that. The build outside, Structure Tone had plenty of experience with, so that wasn't necessarily a problem. But you look at what the project needs are, you put together a staffing chart and then say, okay, what do we have and what do we need and where do we get it? Similar to how Structure Tone knocked on my door, we then went and found the right resources. So the first challenge was getting the job. The second challenge was getting the people to do it.
Yeah, always. And so, what other projects did you work on after that? You went on to lead a series of equally important projects, large projects.
Yes, I was involved next with Ogilvy and Mather's corporate headquarters at Worldwide Plaza, which again was another fit out program happening with the construction of a base building. Zeckendorf was the developer there, and HRH was the general contractor. So while HRH was building out the base building, we were starting to develop the tenant program for Ogilvy and Mather. Again, the building had to be modified for Ogilvy and Mather's unique needs, with a special entrance just for their employees, separate banks of elevators, separate security, and a portion of the building was carved out for their corporate headquarters. So again, the challenge of working together to find a way to make it all happen in a phased and coordinated manner.
That was a very large program, and I recall probably, I mean, the logistics, the complexity of that program was something that was unique and it was a real challenge, I think, to put together and really getting the right subcontractors in there.
Right.
And really the development of that, one of the first big developments on the West Side, right?
That's correct. So, it was not only an office building, but also they had a residential tower behind it, but it's an icon on the skyline.
Yeah. And I remember that. And I remember when you worked on that project. So fantastic. And so what kind of lessons from these various large projects, what kind of lessons can you share? What are the things that stand out to you in terms of lessons learned, both from a technical point of view, contractual, and dealing with people? Because when you're in that complex environment, and you're in the private sector where you've got a tremendous amount of pressure from customers and owners reps. So what did that teach you?
Well, teaches you to be flexible, teaches you to make sure you understand the client's needs and figure out a program to deliver it. I think the challenge of my career in that regard, where one had to demonstrate and put in place what was required to make that all happen, was the MetLife building at 11 Madison Avenue, which we both worked on. So The MetLife project was very unique. It was 3.2 million square feet of space. MetLife had decided that they didn't need this headquarters building any longer. They were going to move to 1 Madison Avenue across the way for their remaining headquarters departments. And they wanted to completely retrofit a turn-of-the-century building in terms of upgrading its elevators, windows, electric, heating, air conditioning, emergency generators, life safety, et cetera, et cetera. Interestingly, the building was originally designed to be like a 50-story building with a 4th phase being built up on top, which was never built. So the building had a tremendous amount of infrastructure in the core, planning for it to go up. And as part of the retrofit, they wanted to consolidate the core and create more space out on the floor plate for the tenants to be able to utilize for their programs.
The building was kind of over-designed initially, but that actually played to its benefit later.
Yes, and also they MetLife had a tremendous amount of insurance policies and paper, given the business they were in, and they had 3 floors of records with mezzanine, so actually 6 floors of paper with tremendous loads. And we looked at it with them and said, it would be probably good to rip out these mezzanines and open up the envelope for what was the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. And so they had very high ceiling heights now and a floor plate that went street to street and avenue to avenue. And those floors and areas became the trading floors for Credit Suisse First Boston. It was really the selling point for when CSFB knocked on MetLife's door to become a major tenant in the building.
Really, the anchor tenant, that's what drove the program, was having that anchor tenant there.
Right. So for a while, things were on the fence in terms of lease negotiations back and forth. And fortunately, that gave us the time to do the pre-construction planning of the project, which was very important given the complexity of what was to be done. So we had the time to put together budgets, put together schedules, look at alternatives, do value engineering, order the long lead items, look to see what was going to be needed for Credit Suisse First Boston's unique occupancy and additional infrastructure that had to go into the program to support their occupancy beyond just a base building upgrade. We brought in new service from Con Edison and brought in all new high voltage service.
Yeah, and then managing the tenant fit out program, essentially orchestrating something that was with so many moving parts, because as the lead construction manager there, and then dealing with all these other contractors that were fitting out various floors for various tenants.
Yes. What we did once the lease was signed and all the systems would go, the challenge was now to get this all built, and they wanted it built in 15 months. And we're looking at $800 million worth of work on the base building alone. So we're talking about 30,000 tons of refrigeration and 4 different chiller plants. We're talking about transformer vaults on Park Avenue and Madison Avenue, 5 vaults on each side with brand new switchgear and new risers and closets and distribution networks. We're talking about reducing the size of the core. We're reducing the elevators in terms of where they served and consolidating them, and retrofitting the elevators, the windows, doing all the demo, doing the abatement, putting in the emergency generator systems that were required, putting on a new roof, and on it went. In addition, CSFB had other needs where they wanted to have their own UPS systems, their own generators, their own fuel oil storage areas, their own dedicated chiller plants. And we came up with a scheme of being able to cross-connect the chiller plants so that in the event one plant did go down for whatever reason, they could have a backup, et cetera. So the basement in MetLife's building was 4 basements, which is unique to any building I've ever worked on. So we had to come up with a scheme to distribute these 4 chiller plants across the 4 basements, along with all the other infrastructure. And many times when we brought the services into the building, rather than being able to go directly up, we had to go down first to be able to go up. So the coordination was incredible. And to overlay what was going on in the base building infrastructure on top of CSFB's infrastructure and put it all in place and making it work was a major challenge.
It was very intense. On top of that, you also had some specialty construction projects going on, such as those restaurants at the corners.
Yes, there were two restaurants that were put in Madison Park, 11 Madison Park and Tablet. It was fitted out in what were the two MetLife Memorial Hall meeting areas, which is where we initially had our field office in, as you recall. And so we had the coordination of that also. But one of the unique things with the MetLife program too was all the administration that was involved. So we had the base building upgrade program, then we had the special base building upgrade program for CSFB, which had to be monitored and tracked and scheduled and accounted for in terms of costing. We had shared logistics with all the common hoists and loading dock and cranes, and worked out an algorithm to allocate those costs in terms of who was using what resources at a point in time. And there was the overtime for the use of that, and that was all accounted for separately.
I recall rather complex accounting apportionments there, tracking all the dollars so that everyone got charged what they were using.
Their fair share of the cost, yes. So that was all negotiated in the lease, which I sat in, many lease negotiation meetings aside from what was going on with the construction. And every week we had a project meeting with the CSFB in attendance, and a lot of that was coordinating what was going on with the two programs. But Structure Tone, I advised them to put two teams in place, one dedicated to the base building and one dedicated to the fit up program. So here was a unique situation where the same construction manager was doing both the base building upgrade and the tenant fit out programs. And we did most of the tenant fit out programs for the other multi-tenants that came into the building. So it was a unique challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think anything like that had been done to that scale, that type of combination base building tenant build out for New York. I mean, that was the first of its kind, if I recall correctly, and it was a massive project.
Oh yeah, it was really quite a complex project, and MetLife was very happy at the end of the day, and they gave us another project at 1 Madison Avenue to do, restoring the historic clock tower that's on the skyline of New York with the gold gilding of their dome and restoration of their clocks. And then when they moved out to Long Island City to Queensbridge Plaza, into a warehouse that Browse had, it was a 350,000 square feet build out into an old warehouse. That again was, when we got involved with the project, that was going to be a .com hotel initially, but .com market collapsed. So Browse got MetLife to lease the complex for their corporate headquarters and move folks out to Long Island City. So again, in like 7 months' time, we had to build out 350,000 square feet of space in a warehouse that at the time we got involved, the birds were still flying in through the windows. There was no roof. There was no,
there's one particular memory, and actually a series of memories that strike me is the various page turns. We call them page turns or scope reviews for the subcontracting packages on these projects that you led. And I remember sitting with you in the conference room, and we would sit down, and you would just go through the entire scope of work for a particular bid package for electrical, let's say, and then you would go through, here's what the bidders have, here's how we do the leveling, and those page turns could take all day.
Oh yeah. We, in the bid packages, well, one of the things we had to strategically do was take a look at, what type of subs and how many of them do we need in order to execute this project. So the electrical side, for instance, we had 3 electrical contractors working on the job to ensure that we could get the project done on time and coordinate the phasing of all that. So to divvy that up and then put together the bid packages so that each electrician knew what piece of the pie they were responsible for and how they would ultimately integrate, including all the testing and commissioning, was very important. So we had, Rider A, general requirements, Rider B, very specific requirements for the particular subcontractor. We had Rider C, which was the safety and all the other programs that we had. And then we had Rider D, which got to the administration of what was involved with the project. And the MetLife project, one of the things we did with MetLife was introduce some administrative programs that added great value for them. So one example was putting in place an ICIP program, which is involved with the city of New York with a tax deferral on the real estate. So the subcontractors that are involved have to fill out weekly payrolls. They need to have minority participation in the workforce. They need to have minority participation in their suppliers and vendors. That all has to get reported on a weekly basis. And MetLife enjoyed a very handsome reduction in their real estate taxes as a result. We also had a historic tax credit. So all the work that was done on the building had to be done under the guidelines of the SHPO organization with the federal government. So the building was declared a National Historic Landmark. And again, that all had to be documented and all the work had to be executed to conform to those requirements with restoring a lot of the original entities and preserving the patina and the character of what the building was all about at the turn of the century as much as possible. We also had a wrap-up insurance program that we put in place for them, which all the subcontractors were now involved in. So rather than the sub supplying their own individual policies, MetLife, we put together with MetLife, even though they're an insurance company, they really hadn't been involved in a wrap-up before. So we put together a wrap-up policy with them and covered all the subcontractors and their employees. And to supplement that, we also put together a safety incentive program, as you may recall. So once every quarter, we got all the workers together in the lobby and gave them coffee and cake and bagels and whatever, and a T-shirt or a flashlight or some giveaway, if you will, that everybody got. And then we had a drawing for people working safely. So each quarter, if someone working for the subcontractor had an accident, everybody in that category, let's say electrical, mechanical, whatever, was disqualified. So the first quarter, maybe 2 or 3 firms were disqualified because they had an accident. And the people who were employed by them were like, hey, we want to be in it to win it. We want to get that. We want to get that prize. We want to get that certificate to go shopping with or whatever.
That was a smart move, going with that wrap-up insurance.
Right.
And innovative and definitely it does 2 things, right? It saves the layers of insurance compounding costs and also standardizes, and you know what you're getting because you've got an insurance company leading the way.
Right, but the EMR on the project was excellent. I mean, it was down like 0.6, which is tremendous. And so the premiums were reflective of that. MetLife saved a lot of money on the premiums, and you save all the hassle of all the counter lawsuits and lawyers and everything else. If God forbid somebody does get hurt or injured, who's suing who did what to who, et cetera, et cetera. So it circumvents that whole.
Now, while you're doing all of this, you are continuing to teach, right? When did you get into teaching and how did that start?
Okay. When I graduated from Pace University, one of the courses that we took was quantitative methods in business. So having studied math on the engineering side, math on the business side for me was a piece of cake. One of the other professors I had became the chairperson of the management science department. And he knocked on my door when I graduated and said, would you be interested in coming to teach 1 night a week the quantitative methods course in statistics at Pace as part of the normal MBA program. So this wasn't the executive program. This was just the normal one. So there were probably about 6, 7 sessions of that course being given in any given semester. And I always had a full classroom. And what I found was that as the semester started, more and more students wanted to come into my classroom because they said, we understand you know how to teach this, Anyway, I did that for 22 years, 1 night a week, usually on Monday night from 5:30 to 8:30. And I found that very rewarding. And for me, it was giving something back to the next generation for the time that other professors took out of their career and gave to me. Okay. So, and you could see the light bulb go off in the student's head, and you can see when it didn't go off too. But for the most part, everybody got through the course and graduated successfully. So it was a very rewarding experience, you know.
It's a
But
lot of work, and to
a
do
lot of
that
work.
while working in an executive capacity at a very large construction company, that's not easy.
No, it wasn't easy, Ravi, in many, many ways. But it's another whole story. That's
And of course, I have to mention that you got me into teaching, and that happened sort of, it just sort of happened, you know, and then I saw how much satisfaction you got from that, and one of the lessons I learned from you is that teaching and learning kind of go hand in hand.
Oh, yeah. As I say, I think I learned as much from my students as I did from my professors in the executive MBA program. And I always tell my students, you know, when we would have a lecture, you know, feel free to contribute if you've been involved with a situation or have some experience in this or whatever. Feel free to contribute, or if you have a different opinion, feel free to chime in, because we can learn from each other. You know, so life's a learning experience. You learn something new every day. You know, that's for sure. But anyway, when I decided to semi-retire out of the construction industry when I turned like 56, NYU asked me to teach their capstone course and their graduate program of construction management. So that was my second endeavor into teaching, this time not on the business side or financial side, but on the construction side. And their program, which was part of the Real Estate Institute, which you're familiar with, similar to what Fordham has today, where you're teaching, they were having their first class come up to the capstone or thesis course. And this is the course where they put together everything they've learned prior regarding budgeting and scheduling and stakeholder analysis and risk analysis and all the planning involved with a project. So my challenge, and again, it took me quite a bit of time and effort to put together this program or this course, was to put together a curriculum, if you will, for a group of students working together, 4 or 5 students together, to work together to study a live project going on in the New York City metropolitan area, and to forget about everything that was done on the project in terms of its budget and schedule and logistics. Look at the project from its inception and plan the project, put together budgets, put together schedules, put together logistics, identify the stakeholders, do all the pre-construction planning, identify the risks, develop, you know, quality control programs, insurance programs, bonding programs, organizational charts, et cetera, all the way through the completion of the project. And so the students work together as a team, which kind of simulates what goes on in reality with people working together as a team on a project. Obviously, they have some issues back and forth in terms of who's responsible for what and how everything's coordinating. But I made sure that each one had a specific assignment and knew what they had to contribute to that team. And every week I would sit with them in class and review what they've accomplished and give them kind of a milestone that I was expecting them to reach. So whether it was a 25% conceptual budget or 50% design development budget or 80% budget to look at creating a GMP, or, you know, identifying the subs or the approach to the project or the phasing. So I gave them the milestones, and every week we'd sit and review what they did. I would critique it. And they would, being that they worked all, you know, for the most part, were busy during the day, I would interact with the students mostly at night and on the weekends and in class. And they would send me the information they were working on and have me critique it during the week, and then I'd send it back to them. So when they got to class, we were kind of just continuing to roll along. It wasn't just waiting for a week to, you know, catch up on things and critique it. So when the 4 weeks we were together, we completely modeled and simulated what goes on in the real life of the project. And I took the students to visit the projects, like had them attend project meetings, and sit and listen to, you know, what the architect's got to say, what the engineer's got to say, what the owner's got to say, what the contractor's got to say. Listen to arguments about requisitions and completions and things not being right or wrong or over budget or behind schedule or whatever it may be. And I would ask them to develop remediation programs for, what they were seeing and hearing. So it was, a lot of hands-on, touch, feel, and see. And
It's a great way to wrap up the entire program, right? The everything they learned, and now they've got to put it to the test.
Right, they got to put it to the test on a real life project.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we've touched on a lot of things, your experience, innovation, leading big projects, technical challenges, dealing with people. Tell us something about, how do you work with clients in challenging environments? How did you get the ability to work with clients collaboratively so that you could realize that vision that they had for the end of the project?
Well, one of the things we would always encourage the client to do was hire us as a construction manager from day one, at the same time they hire their architects and engineers and other consultants, right? And not bring us in, after the thing is half designed or fully designed or ready to be built, et cetera. So, we always felt we could add value in that process. So, meet with the client, understand the program and the needs and the timing. Talk to the consultants and see how they're approaching the project in terms of various systems and technology, whether it's steel or concrete or what type of chillers, what are we doing with power, how much power do we need, elevators, whatever it was, just to extract as much information as possible with them, and then share with them our thoughts about how best to go about procuring that, trying to do some value engineering when things got over budget, which often happens, where the owner's expectations versus the reality of what things cost in a challenging market, especially in today's environment. So we're always looking to add some value. Some of these special programs that we talked about earlier added some value in that regard too. So, communications, it gets down to building a relationship, having some trust and faith in the people that you're dealing with, being part of their team. And I mean, even though Structure Tone paid my salary, right, when I sat at the table with them, John Eschemuller was a member of their team. Okay. So if it was MetLife, I was an employee of MetLife. Okay.
That's a wonderful lesson. That's a lesson that I think more people need to embrace, that instead of being at opposite ends of the table, that you're working with the customer, and it's so important to project success. Now, as you know, you and Richard Lembeck wrote a seminal book in construction management for the urban environment. Tell us about that book, and it's been used widely across the country and hopefully globally as well. I've been using it. Tell us about the book, and tell us if you plan to update that book.
Okay, well, going back to the teaching at NYU, when I taught the capstone course, what I found was that there wasn't a textbook that got its arms around all the unique challenges one faces and has to deal with when building a complex project in a congested urban environment. And Richard Lembeck found the same when the courses he was teaching. And they made us both full-time professors at NYU after being adjunct professors. So we decided to write a book and put together our years of experience, our gray hair, gray matter, whatever, and share that with the students. And not a technical book, but a book that says, how do we manage this process? What's involved with managing the process from day one through day completion? So it took us about a year and a half to compile the 20 some odd chapters. There's 300 exhibits in that book. The exhibits are sample schedules, sample budgets, sample requisitions, sample project meeting agendas, sample safety meetings, sample quality control, sample stakeholder analysis, risk analysis, how do you staff the project and organization charts, how do you put up a hoist? How do you put up a scaffold? How do you put up a
Those checklists are wonderful
crane?
because they provide you with really the instructions. If you follow this meeting minutes, these are the things you have to do.
Right,
I can't tell you how many people have come to me, students. I've had students that run their own construction and development companies, and they tell me, "Oh, we're adopting those checklists and templates that are in the textbook because why
right,
reinvent it?"
right. It's all there. I mean, everything I've experienced over my 30 some odd years of my career went into that book in terms of administrative things and prototypes of how to do things. So that if you buy the book, aside from looking at it in the book, you can also download those forms, okay? And then use them day to day and working on your projects, okay? So it's not a technical book, it's a managerial book, okay? And that's something that didn't exist in the industry at
Yeah,
that
and
time.
you can refer back to it. You can always say, okay, well, what does it say? And you can, it's not a book that you can kind of like read through. It's not a novel. It's a book that it's a hands-on guide to
Right,
here's what you do for various aspects of construction management and delivery, as you said, in a congested urban environment like New York. Um, so the future now, the future of our industry, where do you see it? Where do you see the industry going? And where do you think the opportunities are for young people who are entering the industry?
okay. Well, the first thing I'll say is, one needs to innovate constantly, right? And that's a major challenge. And that's been something that's been around for years, but everything changes, right? Nothing stays static. And if you don't manage change, by default, change will manage you. And then you're out of control.
I'm going to quote you on that.
Okay, go ahead.
You've got to manage change, um, and otherwise the change is going to manage you. And it's almost like that's part of the universe, right? It's
Right. And then if that happens, you're going to probably be out of control. Okay. So, I mean, a given in life is everything changes, nothing stays static. Okay. So one needs to be looking ahead, try to stay ahead of the curve, try to stay ahead of where the industry's going, and be ready for the next challenge and adapt if you can prior to that wave hitting you. Okay. So, you know, um, this past week, unfortunately, we saw Charlie Thornton pass away, who was one of the leading founders of the ACE Mentor program, who both you and I were involved with. Charlie was a great guy, but they had a picture of him in his office going back, 40, 50 years ago. And there he was with slide rule, doing manual calculations, drawing on vellum, T-squares, slide glides. There were no computers, there were no calculators. And there was even a big eraser, electric eraser.
I saw that the engineer that he's standing over the engineer, and the engineer's got the electric eraser with him.
Eraser, right.
Remember
So
that?
yeah, so I mean, you think about that 50 years ago and where we are today with all the automated systems that we use for AutoCAD and designing things and Revit and whatever. It's come a long way. 3D modeling, collaboration, computer programs to help us build smarter and share information and do modeling and prototypes and help with the coordination and get the architect and the engineer and all the consultants on the team talking to each other in terms of what each one of them are bringing to the table. It has to be integrated into the project, right? So that it all fits together the way it should. So one needs to manage change and stay ahead of that curve. So the only way I see to do that is that you got to develop your people. You got to train them. And the training can be on the job, obviously, but it shouldn't be just on the job. There should be some off the job training. And when I worked in the Bell system, I had a requirement as a manager for my people to schedule at least 1 week of off-site training for those people, whether it was technology or how to run a meeting or dealing with men and women in an organization or whatever it may be. One of the training sessions I went to was how to meet the press, conducted by the American Management Association. Right, how do you get up in front of a group and deal with people and talk expertensely, off the cuff, if you will, and be able to command the audience and lead. So that's all important. And, people will rise to the challenge if you challenge them. And I find that a lot of companies don't often challenge their employees, criticize them if they make a mistake. You got to nurture your people. If they make a mistake, I mean, don't kill them. You might reprimand them and say, you made a boo-boo and whatever, but help them pick up the pieces and move along, and don't make the same mistake twice. Learn from your mistakes. And, a lot of these people are going to become the future project managers of the business, or executives in the business, etc. A lot of the companies are also putting in place, as part of their organizations, an innovation officer as a title, and also a strategic planning officer. And one of the things I found with people is that you find people that are very technically skilled on your team. You find people that are very managerially skilled on your team, but seldom do you find people that have both talents together. And if you do find that person, most of the time they're in a role where they don't have time to do both at the same time. They either focus on the technical side or the managerial side. Okay. So companies are saying that, assigning somebody who's going to focus on innovation and be dedicated to it and not have to worry about, the fires.
That makes a lot of sense. And both you and I have experienced this. So one of the interesting things about coming up in a technically grounded industry like construction is that you can have somebody that's great technically, an engineer, an architect, and then they work their way up, and then one day they're leading people, but all the skills that made them successful, all the experiences, they have not been trained to manage people and lead people. So they get into a position where they have very little training in, and
Right.
and that's got to be managed. And you just, so it's almost like, okay, you're great at technical, now we're going to put you and you're going to lead teams. And then the tendency for technical people is to try to continue to solve problems. There's a great author out there who's a management wizard, Simon Sinek, and he says that the job of the leader is not to solve problems, but to encourage, empower, and put the framework in place to enable people who work for the leader to solve the problems. Because you as one person can only solve, that's not your job anymore, but it's hard to let go of that.
Right. You need to be able to delegate authority and responsibility to your people. And you'd be surprised that the people will respond to the challenge if you challenge them. Okay. But if you sit back and just hold on to everything, I mean, it's never going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And our industry definitely needs more of that. And that the industry is evolving in great ways. Certainly you've inspired so many people in this industry. Can't even count how many people have been inspired by you, by example, not only by example, but by actually working with you, and setting the tone to move forward. And we thank you for that. It's been quite a journey.
Well, it's my pleasure to have done that for you and many other people. And as I say, people took time out of their careers to do that for me, and I'm eternally grateful to them. So it's kind of my way of giving something back to the next generation, and hope that they'll do the same going forward. Along those lines, I've set up 2 scholarships for students graduating from Brooklyn Tech, moving on to study at City College, where I went to school for my engineering degree, civil engineering. So I set up 2 scholarships every year to be awarded to students that the head of the civil engineering department at Brooklyn Tech selects. A lot of them have been women and minorities over the last couple of years. So more and more women are getting involved in the business, which I'm happy to see. When I went to school, it was all men. There were no women, which we kind of had a sheltered environment in our education, So I've set up 2 scholarships to help them along. And today, tuition isn't free at City College. I mean, they have to pay. It's nowhere near as much as in a private college, but for them, a lot of these students, it's still a major challenge to be able to pay that tuition. So kind of my way of helping the next generation. And aside from giving them scholarships, I've also agreed to mentor them, through their studies and their careers. And one of the fellows, John Ang, who I think you recall, he's graduating today, this semester, and I've been in touch with him through the years, mentoring him as to his studies, his specialization, what he wants to do in terms of moving on with his career. We've arranged to get him some internships over the summer to work, and also, it's all great things for the students to experience before they graduate. So when they graduate, they can hit the ground running and not only have an education, but have some actual experience as to, what's going on in the world of construction. And so
That's wonderful. It's wonderful that you've been able to do that. You continue to do that, and we hope you continue to do that for many decades to come, because our industry needs people like you to give us that guidance so that we stay on the right track.
right.
John,
Well,
it's been an honor to have you on this podcast.
it's been my pleasure to be here, Ravi, and thank you for sharing your time and your thoughts and your compliments. And just one thing I wanted to say also is, the major challenge I see going forward in the United States is the aging infrastructure. Okay. And I mean, there's all sorts of buildings being built and whatever, but the infrastructure that makes our country work is falling apart, as you're probably well aware in your role in your company. So whether it's, water supply, sewage, airports, bridges, tunnels, highways, air pollution, energy, refineries, production facilities, manufacturing facilities, this country needs a major boost of infrastructure and renewals. And I'm afraid the politicians aren't focusing on that need properly. So I would just encourage everybody to try to ensure that the money gets allocated, that we don't wind up with bridges falling down or water tunnels collapsing or whatever it may be that's going to cause us a major problem, in the future. It's all preventable. All it takes is some planning and time and resources and money to get modernized.
We've got to work together for our great nation, so that we remain at the cutting edge for what we're known for, leading the way in innovation and technology and all the things that the world looks up to us for. And we've got to maintain that leadership. And that's a great way to conclude. So thank you for that message. And then that message is getting heard. So thank you.